Disbelief Papyrus has been a part of the game since the start, all the way back in the ancient era. A year later, in 2020, Disbelief would get 3 new phases, which made him into one of the strongest and most annoying characters in the game. This version of Disbelief was extremely flawed, just like the entire game at the time. With attacks that were impossible to react, no global cooldowns, a block that would make the Disbelief immortal that stayed in the game for the next 4 years no matter how many times the devs tried to fix it, and a reward which wasn't worth the amount of effort put into beating all the phases in a single match. Fast forward to 2023, where weapons were more than just a slightly bigger number with a model attached to it. And global cooldown was added last year. This made Disbelief a really bad choice for a bit, as almost everything could one-shot him by just breathing hard enough. So the developers made the obvious choice of creating an entirely new system instead of just increasing the HP. Yeah, I still don't get why they did that. With Disbelief getting the biggest defense buff of the game. Because of this change, Disbelief was just immortal during the first 2 phases, unless you were using something that dealt a ridiculous amount of damage like Chris. But hey, at least the immortality bug was fixed, so no need to worry about a Disbelief that's twice as immortal. And besides, he only remained locked up for the tiny amount of almost an entire year, and there was a slight damage buff to the collar blasters somewhere, but that didn't prevent people from just not taking any damage inside them, due to how much lag they produced. But what exactly took them so long? The long-awaited Disbelief rework. Now, reworks in ULC aren't an easy thing to make. Characters get entirely new models, every single attack has to be modeled, coded, and tested. This one's optional, along with the new map, passives, final attacks, and upgrades that the character might have. Understood all of that? Good. Now add another phase into the mix. And just like that, the amount of work required was doubled in a second. Now instead of the character having 2 phases, it has 4 phases, with one of them being 4 microphases combined. And so, Disbelief became the sole reason as to why Sins of the Past took so long. To the point where the entire dev team was working on him just to get the update out faster. Then, in June 8, 2024, the long-awaited Sins of the Past update arrived. Disbelief being the most anticipated out of the new reworks. And you'd think that with that much work put into it he would be one of the most polished characters in the game. Instead, he's an extremely rushed mesh of ideas that became one of the most annoying characters in the game. So please, get comfy and grab a drink, and I'll tell you why Disbelief is the biggest failure of Sins of the Past. Phase 1. The one that's actually decent. Before the fighting even starts, we have a 23-second intro, which I know is weird to bring up now, but it will make sense later. Phase 1 is the phase with the least amount of problems, a few of them being how upgrade 1 fucks up the hitbox of the dash, and the blasters being server-sided, which ends with your HP being turned into KR from time to time. But that's nothing compared to how oppressive the block is. Before the rework, Disbelief's block used to leave him vulnerable for a second after it was used. Now after blocking, Disbelief becomes completely invulnerable to all damage until the block goes off cooldown. This would be a huge issue if not for the block limit. But that only fixes one of the biggest issues here, as there's no way to kill Disbelief on this phase until his blocks run out. Well then, you say, I'll just hit him until his blocks run out. That's right, Disbelief running out of blocks instantly triggers phase 2 if they have it, so the only way to kill a Disbelief in phase 1 before this happens is to either go against one that doesn't have the phase 2 yet, or specifically use the shoes and drain their stamina before your teammates trigger phase 2. But what if you were playing the game during the month of release, used it grade 0, and instead of playing normally, you decided to stand still and spam block? Well, you just discovered one of the biggest oversights of the update. The blood cheese. By doing this, Disbelief's stamina rate always stays at max. Mix this with a block taking only 5 stamina to use, and you have an immortal Disbelief. Then combine that with a repel mechanic that the block has, and you get an immortal Disbelief that can attack. And since 0 upgrades lacks the block limit, he could do this until the match ended. The only way to counter this being the shoes again, but no one knew this, since ULC players can't read. And the worst part is that the devs took almost an entire month to fix it, even after the bug became pretty well known. Luckily, you could just block anyone abusing it and join another server. But this does make me question how much the devs and the testers actually test things. Other than that, this phase is the best one. The fight itself is fine, but only while against a Disbelief with more than 2 upgrades, as the phase crumbles the moment it has to stand on its own against competent players. All of phase 1's attacks are really easy to dodge, except for the blasters due to them being silver-sided. You genuinely have to be rushing in extremely aggressively for you to die, which is why they work when the Disbelief has more phases, as the phase ends right before they have to deal with their lack of stamina. So most of the time, once Disbelief has reached this point, they're just forced to camp the bone spin until they eventually die. To recap, this phase seems fine at a glance, but its issues become apparent really quickly. But even with all his flaws, he's the closest thing to an actual character here. And from this point onwards, it all goes downhill from here.
Cannot, with faith, make spaghetti and meatballs without meat. I need meat!
Phase 2. The Mismatched Mess. Starting with this phase we have another cutscene. This one heals Vicaris and lasts for 47 seconds, along with being impossible to skip. This is weird, because even back during the Fly era you could skip cutscenes, so what changed now? Anyways, let's see how phase 2 works. I'll be back in a bit.
Weón, solo estuve hablando por unos segundos, como chucha se murió. Me está hueviando, como chucha tiene huesos de cristal, revivan al culiao y no lo maten hasta que yo lo diga.
Damn. They're fast. Anyways, phase 2 is incredibly weak compared to almost every single phase. Even Set is better than his thing. For starters, everything in his kit is awful. There's not a single good thing here other than the blink. The dash is only used to escape the carries. The blasters are RNG dependent and are extremely easy to dodge. The blasters are only used to spawn more. The bone jumps are poorly designed. If you try to dodge them the intended way you'll get yourself killed. Instead, you have to jump into the bones, and never stop jumping to take almost no damage from them. The Mercy is incredibly buggy and almost never works as intended, most of the time launching carrots into the void where they can't be killed. The point of this phase is apparently a mad rush for both teams to end it as quickly as possible, but for some reason, I get the feeling that wasn't really the intent of the phase, as if there was more things planned for it, but things ended up getting scrapped due to time constraints. With all of that said, a fight against him is one of 2 things. 1. The Disbelief tries his hardest to win using phase 2 and fails miserably. 2. The Disbelief gets killed in 10 seconds. Or 3. The Disbelief spends everything he has and enters phase 3 before anyone gets close to him. This is the most common result, as Disbelief gets 16 speed during phase 2, making him just as fast as the carrots. This single change is the reason why most of the time, phase 2 lasts long enough to reach phase 3. Phase 2 isn't a character. He's a quick time event disguised as a character, takes long to spend everything and you die, simple as that. But this is only if you have phase 3, as phase 2 is a separate upgrade, so, unless you are going against newer players, phase 2 is just gonna get killed. And worst of all, he still has a big part of the phase 3 cutscene if he dies, making him the second biggest time waster in his character. To recap. If you want to max Disbelief, just use upgrade 1 or 0 depending on which one you prefer, until you max him. Never use upgrade 2.
Sáquenme la chucha culiaos. ¿Qué chucha? ¿Se murió del estrés?
Dad, I just snorted a suitcase full of coke and I'm starting to feel the effects.
I just snorted a suitcase full of Pepsi.
Phase 3. The Time Waster. Once again, we have another cutscene. This one lasts for 53 seconds. We have reached the 2-minute mark already, and that doesn't go down by much if they have been skip enabled. This phase is divided between 4 smaller ones, but realistically, we have 1 real character, a minigame, and 2 green era characters with new models. Let's start with something simple. The Sandspot. This thing is really disappointing compared to the previous one created a year earlier. All you can do is either spawn a single blast or spawn an after top bone circle for some reason. And just like the old one, there's a random chance for the bed to suddenly stop moving during the entire match. But unlike the old ones, I think there's no way for the bots to break completely. Not that that matters, as the bud is most useful as a meat shield rather than its intended purpose. The bud barely makes any difference in the fight when it comes to its attacks. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else to say here. Disbelief himself is at his most powerful here, having no stamina limit, letting him spam as much as he wants to, with the only thing stopping him from killing the entire lobby being his cooldowns. Now, most his attacks aren't really that remarkable. You just aim in the general direction of the Karas, and hope that they die before the timer ends. This is one of the main issues of this phase, as all Disbelief does is just mindlessly spam whatever isn't on cooldown. This makes the fight go stale for both sides after a while, the Karas getting tired of the spam, and the Disbelief getting carpal tunnel syndrome. And while the Karas do have a way to lower the timer by hitting him, this option is completely thrown out the window if the Disbelief chooses to camp out that bone jumps, as unlike phase 2, the floor bones here deal 3 damage instead of 1, and along with that, this move is gonna be active during most of the phase, thanks to its pretty generous cooldown. So, if you're unlucky enough to not have any ranged option, and if it doesn't get hit once, you'll have to fight this phase for 2 minutes and 12 seconds. This is so long that the punk section of the song plays for a bit before the timer ends. Luckily, this is something that realistically won't happen on a real match, as you have 18 seconds of downtime after the platform goes on cooldown, letting you get a few hits in each time it happens. This is made slightly harder if he's camping near the butt, but don't worry, the butt isn't even good as a meat shield, so just time your M1s correctly. Now, with how much I've talked about the spam, you'd think that the Karas have it really bad here, right? Well, you're not wrong, as this is the strongest Disbelief phase, and the spam is really annoying if there's more than one person alive, but just like in the animation, the Karas all get their HP set to 184, but there's a little side effect to this, because if a Kara has the determination soul and does enough DT to revive, then they practically won the match already. This isn't even hard to do either. You get 2 full phases to get enough DT before this one. DT is so strong here you practically had to purposely get hit to lose. This soul isn't the only thing that benefits from the HP increase, but it's the most notable example, and listing them all would just make this video longer than it should be, so let's move to the next phase. Plung. Plung is Disbelief's last line of defense before he turns into a plevel cutscene right before our very eyes. No, you two don't count. Despite this being just Plung with the ball you have to damage, this is my favorite part not only of phase 3, but out of the entire character in general. It's just a nice change of pace that doesn't overstay its welcome. But just like the previous phases, it has its fair share of issues, the biggest one being that hasn't been fixed for a year, along with the camera having a lot of bugs. Sometimes the camera will just be reversed for no reason, which adds a little extra challenge to the Kara team but not by much. Other times the camera might not work at all, showing the void instead of the minigame. And the rarest of them all, sometimes you can just fall to the void. Even with how buggy this phase might be at times, this is still one of the best phases in general. Same cannot be said for the next 2, which I'm putting together since they're almost exactly the same. Minus just a few attacks from both the current spear and the old Adrian spear with a resting bone zone and a single unique attack. And since it's just your average Adrian era character with nothing special about him, Undyne can deal some damage thanks to the unique move, but everything else is shit. Since it's just a cakewalk, he's a complete nothing bringer. There's also the butts in the Undyne part, but they don't really matter. The Sans butt is the same, and the Papyrus butt just uses the bone throw or a single blaster. They're almost as useless as the Ghost Crossbones bed, but at least the concept of a Ghost Crossbones is funnier, along with the way he's jumping constantly. Just look at him. Pure joy. This could make a grown man cry. Wait, where was I? Oh yeah. These two are just extremely rushed. There's nothing good I can say about them other than the one you attack Undyne is. The quality of phase 3 varies greatly between phases. The Papyrus phase is just mindless spam. Plung is king of fun, but the completely skips this phase, and Sans and Undyne are just filler. But despite everything wrong in this phase, we have yet to cover the worst this character has to offer. Phase 4. The Celebratory Pinata. After the 1 minute and 8 seconds long cutscene, that's the Sans and Undyne phases, we are rewarded with another cutscene, but don't worry, this one is almost as long as the intro. And the most faithful phases to the animation. It's genuinely a nice phase to fight against at least once if you haven't done it already. But there's a problem with this. This is a multiplayer game, and Disbelief is one of the most popular fan characters in the entire undertale fandom. Meaning you'll see this phase over and over and over again until you're sick of it. And so the more the rose-tinted glasses wear off, you start to see this phase for what it truly is. This isn't the last chance Disbelief has to kill you. This is a victory lap for the Karas. There's almost nothing that can realistically hurt you outside of these small bones that start in the collar walls part. The cool phase, as I call it, can't hurt you as long as you move slightly out of the way. The car phase relies completely in RNG, and even if the car hits, it doesn't do much. The basketballs can't be aimed for some reason. The wall phase can be beaten without using the movement keys. And that's it. The phase ends there. Anyways, after all of time, the final cutscene begins. Blue boats spawn from both ends of the corridor, and the carries are left to decide his fate. After waiting for him to shut up for 30 seconds, of course. If they chose to kill him, speaks for 10 seconds before dying. If you wait for 10 seconds, instead you get the spell ending, where he speaks for 37 and leaves, giving both teams a single extra win. And just like that, we are finally done. Except for one thing I said earlier. Why do I consider this the worst phase? The answer is simple, really. This phase is everything that's wrong with this character combined. Mindless spam, attacks that aren't even a real threat, is almost completely reliant on a single move, and the worst of them all. Unlike phase 2, this phase did a lot more carefully into it. A lot of the moves on this phase are completely unique, which makes it even worse considering phase 2 is more of a chance at actually hurting the Karas compared to this. And remember the joke about Sans being better than phase 2? That's not a joke here. The copy and paste filler character that lasts for 25 seconds is better than a fully reworked phase. You just can't make this shit up. This phase struggles at even doing the most pitiful amounts of damage. All you need to survive it is to have at least over 20 HP, something that by this point you most surely have if you use BT, like everyone that doesn't want to deal with the phase 3 spam. But what's the actual reward for beating all of the 4 phases, you may ask? 30x. You get the same amount of X for beating the character with the most phases in the game, as beating a 0 upgrade little. Same thing with the extra win. In the time spent beating all the 4 phases, you could have already won 3 to 5 matches. There's no real incentive to fight a max Disbelief, other than fight it a few times if you haven't done that already. To recap, every time you have to fight a max Disbelief, no matter how long it takes to beat phase 1, the start of 3, and Pwong. You have to go through 2 minutes and 30 seconds of obligatory cutscenes, 2 endings that add to either 10 or 37 seconds, the optional intro that almost all Disbelief players have aped at taking 23 seconds, the Sans and Undying phase taking 1 minute and 8 seconds, and phase 4 also taking 1 minute and 8 seconds. And you get 5 minutes and 19 seconds of filler. Oh yeah, I forgot about phase 2. This is one of the most common possible outcomes here, by the way. Meaning over half of the entire fight is filler. And the worst of all, I've yet to mention one minuscule thing during all the video. This tone cancels out all the music in the fight. What? I like the Disbelief OST. Now that we have covered all the phases, we can compare how much of an improvement the rework was to its older version. Phase 1 used to be used to either corner camp with a block, or just skip the phase to get to phase 3 quicker. Some things never change, do they? The current phase 1, while being kinda weak, it's a lot more unique compared to the old one. And... I do like block combos. Okay, yeah. I'm just trying to be as kind as possible with this phase, because it's the most well-made one out of them, and even then it's not that good. I'm still giving it a point because I hate block combos though. Phase 2 used to mostly spam everything to get phase 3 faster, and while some of his attacks barely did anything, that doesn't mean it was defenseless, as if you weren't careful or just got unlucky, you could actually die here. Current phase 2 exaggerates the issues the phase had to a comical degree. Now phase 2 barely deals any damage and is completely reliant on reaching phase 3. Phase 3 used to just be mindless spam before the global cooldowns got added, but after their inclusion this phase became more of a time waster rather than an instant win button for the Disbelief. The rework, while lacking in several aspects, is at least better than standing on a shittily coded moving platform while trying to dodge walls with lagging hitbox, or waiting for 20 seconds for the platforms to end. If phase 4 survived for longer than 10 seconds, then they just camped on top of the balls and spammed everything at the direction of the carries, and then died due to lack of stamina. Current phase 4 lost the ball camp, but now he's a survival phase, and he's somehow worse at dealing damage than the old one, but hey, at least the face is pretty to look at. And so, this leaves us with 2 phases that were improved, and 2 that were made worse. This isn't looking too good for Disbelief, but we still haven't compared him to the other reworks in the update, so let's do that right now. Revenge stopped being an insta-kill sniper and turned into something that's actually fun to play as and go against, even if he gets completely countered by not fighting him for 20 seconds, and there's a cutscene at the end that stretches out to 5. Swamp Papyrus went from being one of the most prominent spammers in the game, to something that's a bit more fair to fight, and while he's still annoying, has some questionable design choices, and he has the cutscene problem most characters nowadays seem to have. At least he's not mindlessly spamming like before. Classic was, and still is the strongest character in the game even after over 30 nerfs. But at least no matter how unfair Classic might be, the fight is never going to last as long as a max Disbelief. Hardwell used to be God during all of Empty Promises, but after that rebalancing, he can actually be killed now, and the fight is a lot faster compared to how it used to without losing any of its identity, and while he still is extremely strong in the right hands, and fighting a good one feeling like a chore, it's still far better than the old one, rest of shit smell tall. And lastly, we have the rework that's considered the worst one of the update by most. The Papyrus rework. Papyrus is an awful character not only for new players but in general. His flaws are far too great to ignore. With each passing update, Papyrus gets power crept harder by every new weapon added. And even then, he offers a challenge almost no other character in ULC has. When playing Papyrus, you get this feeling of dread, as even the slightest mistake might end in your death. And that makes winning with him one of the most satisfying feelings in the game. Disbelief can't replicate that. As Phase 2 is way too weak to kill anyone with a brain and Phase 4 is just a victory lap. Now, just because I consider Papyrus more fun than Disbelief, doesn't mean he isn't dogshit in desperate need of a rework, but the fact that even one of the weakest characters in the game is more fun than the 4-phase behemoth, goes to show something went horribly wrong here. And I'm pretty sure you've been connecting most of the dots while watching this video, so here's what exactly happened. Some time had passed since the release of Empty Promises. The devs had started working in the Papyrus Update 2, which was the old name of Sins of the Past. Each dev was working in a specific aspect of the update, with at least one dev working in one character at a time. With one exception. Disbelief. Since Disbelief has 4 phases, he required a lot more work than any other character, so more manpower was used for him just to get the update out faster. But even that wasn't enough. Which meant that they had to rush out whatever they could at the expense of corners being cut. And just like that, we got the current Disbelief. Now, I got a question not for the viewers, but for the devs. Why did you work in all 4 phases in the same update? You guys know by now just how long this takes. This updated 5 other reworks in the works already, so why try to add the entirety of Disbelief on the same update? It just makes less sense the more I look into this, and I need to know why. Now, in the state Disbelief currently resides in, is there anything that can be salvaged? Well, yeah. I'll start with Phase 1. Apart from the block being so oppressive, his attacks leave something to be desired. The phase lacks any sort of real close range option, and the ones he has are extremely easy to avoid. So adding something to remedy that might make this phase better, like what they did with Revenge. For this, I've come up with a few ways this could be done that wouldn't take much effort to implement. The first being buffing the bone roll. As said earlier, the move is really easy to dodge, so making this move stronger might fix that. The second way to fix this is... Okay, I ran out of ideas already. Oh, you almost forgot. Apart from finding a way to net the block, why not make it a taco move? That way, you don't have to awkwardly move your finger or mouse to the 7 key, and then have to click for the move to activate it. Pong only really needs to have its bugs fixed. And as for the other phases, I genuinely have no other way to fix them other than to completely have them reworked. Another thing I think would be interesting if Disbelief ever gets reworked in 5 years from now, would be making the upgrades make their specific phase stronger. But the more upgrades he has, the previous ones get weaker. This way there would be a lot more variety when fighting a Disbelief, and would make the upgrade system more interesting than just using the best upgrade. As for the rewards, with how Disbelief is currently, the best reward for beating 1 would be 30 EXP and the win for beating phase 1 or 2, and so 90 EXP and 3 wins for beating phase 4. And lastly, the cutscenes. Apart from making them shorter, I got a few ideas on how to improve them gameplay-wise. Starting with bringing back the cutscene skip. I got no clue why this was removed from every single character except for Hyber, so just bring it back and most of the complaints would be gone. Next, would be adding a way to skip death cutscenes. Unlike normal cutscenes, death cutscenes never had a way to be skipped, so just add a cutscene skip at the end too, right? Well, I've come up with a more interactive way to fix this. Yeah, that's right. Why not just have the cutscene be skipped by having a Kara attacking the Sens? And for the third and last, why not add a shorter cutscenes option? This way, the Sans can just skip the cutscene by himself before the match even starts, and the cutscene would last around 5 to 10 seconds, depending on the character. And guess this was all I had to say about Disbelief. I don't really know what exactly to do after this video, so don't expect anything new from this channel for a while. So, the lesson of the day is:
Disbelief es mierda, el Trello y la wiki son una cagada, y ya váyanse a la concha tu madre.